First up that we would like to address is the investigation of the Consulate in Dubai. The department has acted on information from whistleblowers about alleged security breaches and misconduct. The Consul General has been recalled from Dubai to Pretoria to respond to the preliminary investigation's findings. And we want to also mention that the investigation is still ongoing. Second issue that we would like to also address is the continued incarceration of our citizens in Equatorial Guinea. South Africa is continuing in its pursuit of a solution with the government of Equatorial Guinea. South Africa is deeply concerned about the ongoing detention of its citizens, Mr. Peter Haksem and Mr. Brics in Equatorial Guinea. Last Tuesday, our ambassador to Equatorial Guinea, Ambassador Nolufefe Dawayo, met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Malabo to address the family's concerns, as well as the issue of restricted access, which has been granted to our officials and the families of the detained individuals. Simultaneously, our acting Deputy Director General for Africa summoned the Ambassador for Equatorial Guinea to South Africa, and he reiterated our concerns and handed over a note verbal. The Ambassador of Equatorial Guinea undertook to convey South Africa's message to his government. Minister Lamula has concluded a successful working visit to Japan. Minister Lamula participated in the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, which was held on the 24th and 25th of August in Tokyo, Japan. South Africa warmly welcomed the participation of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic in this important gathering of African Union member states, and the meeting laid a foundation for the 9th TICAD Summit, which will take place in Yokohama in Japan in August 2025. Minister Lamula participated in a panel discussion on how the government and the private sector can work together to promote economic transformation and startups and small-medium enterprises to spur trade and investment between Africa and Japan. The minister also had an opportunity to interact with and network with Japanese African startups, including some of our own young South Africans in Japan. Minister Lamula delivered a statement at an event titled Strengthening Connectivity, and the minister's remarks focused on implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which combines Africa's market integration with its industrial and infrastructure development strategy to enhance Africa's development and productive capacity. In this regard, the minister highlighted that whilst our development partners are important to Africa, the continent should remain committed and united to its internal integration agenda and industrialization objectives. Minister Lamula also highlighted opportunities for Japan to redirect its investment into the manufacturing sector, which is one of the strongest stimulatory effects and economic multipliers of various sectors for our economy. While in Japan, Minister Lamula had several bilateral engagements, one with his counterpart, as well as with representatives of Japanese businesses operating in South Africa. These engagements noted and welcomed the successful diplomatic negotiations earlier this year, which have borne fruit, excuse the pun. The first consignment of South Africa's avocados arrived in Japan whilst Minister Lamula was there, and this was a significant milestone marking the beginning of a new market opening for South African avocados in the East. South Africa's economic diplomacy efforts continue to yield results in 2024, as is evidenced by breakthroughs for our avocado industry, including opening new markets in China and India as well. Speaking to Toyota executives attending the JETRO interaction, Minister Lamula acknowledged Toyota's most recent announcement of a strategic investment of 1.2 billion rand in the South African automotive industry. This investment shows that South Africa remains an attractive investment destination and is a magnet for foreign direct investment. Now we move to South Africa's upcoming international engagements for the month. We have a Norway incoming visit. Minister Lamula will host his counterpart, Mr. Espen Barth Aid, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Kingdom of Norway. South Africa and Norway have developed a close relationship dating back to the early years of the struggle against apartheid, and when Norway became an active supporter of organized resistance against the apartheid regime. Since establishing formal diplomatic relations, South Africa and Norway have sought to deepen cooperation in maritime sectors, alternative and renewable energy, environmental protection, science and technology, and skills development. South Africa and Norway hold similar positions on the strengthening of multilateral institutions and improving global governance and peace, especially in promoting women, peace and security agendas. The two ministers will discuss ways to further strengthen their relations and exchange views on regional, continental, and global issues of common interest. Minister Lamula will also embark on a working visit to the United States of America, the 12th of September. This visit precedes the 79th United Nations General Assembly, and during this working visit, Minister Lamula is expected to engage high-level activities during the week, which will present South Africa's position. This also want to add that Minister Lamula will also embark on a working visit, of course, to China, which will also then be followed by the FOCAC summit, which we expect the presidency to provide more information on during the course of the week or when it is an opportune time for them to do so. Okay, thank you very much. I can take questions from you, colleagues. If I can just find my pen. Okay, Kaya.
Hi, good day. It's Kylie Kumari here from SABC News. So, Sir, maybe just to get your reaction over this past weekend, we saw once again the ICC prosecutor, Mr. Khan, appealing to the court to make sure that the warrant of arrest against Mr. Netanyahu, Gallant, and Sino as well from Hamas, those warrants of arrest are issued. Do you think that that's like a welcome move? We know that South Africa has been very vociferous against this particular issue. But
yeah, sure.
Maybe just another one as well. MPOX. So during the past SADC summit as well, we saw where the SADC leaders spoke about this outbreak, where they called for an urgent meeting with the health ministers in the bloc. Is South Africa perhaps leading in any way, as we know that President Ramaphosa is the AU champion on preparedness when it comes to, such outbreak of diseases? So, yeah, just those two. Thank you.
Okay, so on the ICC developments, of course, I think it's a welcome step to see the ICC fulfilling its duties, and that is what is expected of the ICC. So, indeed, it is encouraging that the work that the ICC is doing is continuing, and we look forward to the processes unfolding in a just manner, in a manner that ensures that there's accountability for what we are seeing, the war crimes, at the very least, of what we are seeing in the Gaza Strip. On the MPOX issue, yes, quite correctly, it's a very emerging issue and an important issue in the SADC region. We have seen an increase in cases, and in South Africa as well. I think as we stand now, the cases are at about 27. So this is something that we do believe our SADC Council ministers will be convening on soon, as per the directive of SADC. And quite correctly as well, President Ramaphosa, as the champion of the AU Health Committee, has really placed this as something that we should be able to attend to as quickly as possible, so that we are prepared to deal with this endemic, as well as to ensure that when we do need the vaccines, we have the capacity to vaccinate our people. So I think those are the emerging priorities, and we hope that our counterparts in the health departments will be able to provide a technical response substantively quite soon. All right, let's start there. And this also goes to the Israel conflict as well. We continue to call for a ceasefire. We do believe that the only way for there to be a solution to the conflict is if people are able to discuss and get to the table and discuss what is the source of conflict. And we don't believe that the barrel of the gun is something that's going to resolve those conflicts in any way. We also have also said previously that the continued conflict in Israel, the way it's in Israel and Gaza, rather more Gaza, is unfolding, can lead to an escalation. And we are seeing that now with Lebanon reacting in the way it's reacting, at least through Hezbollah, and that remains somewhat of a concern. But also to your question on Sudan, equally there, South Africa has been able to engage both parties, both warring factions in that, and we still believe that, again, having both people at the table discussing an outcome is the best solution. We will continue to assess how the discussions are unfolding in Switzerland to ensure that at the very least, we are able to ensure that there's peace in that region and the dialogue continues. What's most important is that the dialogue process must continue and it mustn't fail. On your question about Ukraine, whether we continue not to be interested, I think for the longest time there's been this perception that South Africa is looking the other way, but we have previously and continuously stated that we have an active non-alignment stance, which is not neutrality. Active non-alignment is based on, in fact, non-alignment itself is based on 10 principles, the Bandung principles, and I would really encourage colleagues to look up those principles so that we can understand what we mean by non-alignment. It's self-determination amongst them, respecting the rights to the territorial integrity of a state, but also ensuring that we live in a rule-based system. So not a system where you can just help yourself and take the law into your own hands. So our position is consistent with that, and amongst other things. So I think the notion that we keep looking the other way with that particular conflict has been misplaced for some time. Sure.
During his stay in New York, if Minister will take part in the ministerial meeting of Brics countries on the 26th of September, and how helpful for the is Brics for the policy of Brics, policy of Brics for the South African diplomacy in general?
Yes, certainly the Minister will be taking part in a number of meetings, and that's likely to be one of them. Brics remains an important body for the South African government. It's a state. It's a union of like-minded states in many ways, but also the economic opportunities that present themselves within the BRICS nations is something that the South African government continues to pursue. So the BRICS as an institution is still an important institution to the South African government. So as we have been doing over the years, nothing will change with BRICS, nothing will change with G20, nothing will change with G77. We'll continue promoting our values and our national interests in those forums. Any questions online, Nelson?
Yes.
I'll come back to the House in the next round.
Okay, thank you. We have questions. One from Peter Fabricius. He's asking, please could you explain why you have recalled the ambassador, the Consul General in Dubai, and to Livona? What does the department believe he has done wrong? And is there a wider problem of irregular fraudulent visas issued by DIRCO officials abroad?
The Minister of Home Affairs, in his briefing to Parliament, did explain that the best way for us to really improve our visa regime systems is for us to eliminate human interference as much as possible, or human conduct as much as possible. So we're going to start seeing more online processes. That's something we will look forward to and welcome. We, like I've said, have asked Mr. Lebone to come back to answer questions pertaining to the preliminary findings of our investigation in the United Arab Emirates, Dubai Consulate, which is still ongoing. I think that answers Mr. Fabricus's questions. Yes. Any other questions online? Sorry.
It's a similar question from Lindsay Thain-Klinger, she's saying, in light of reports that DIRCO officials are flouting Home Affairs procedures for the issuing of visas at foreign missions, is DIRCO looking at reviewing its relationship with Home Affairs on its officials performing this Home Affairs duties? Can you also comment on the recall of your diplomat over the visa issue?
Yeah, I think that one has been answered. Nothing else. Okay, let's go back in the room. Any questions in the room? After you, Kaya, before you, Kaya, let's make you the last person. Let's take the colleagues in the crescent there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave that one to the presidency. They will unpack further on that. But FOCAC also is an important summit for us, and of course you would know we enjoy very good bilateral relations with the Chinese government. They're also our biggest trading partner, so our engagements with them are always at that level. Sure. Yes, certainly. That's a very important initiative that South Africa has initiated. And it actually speaks to my point about non-alignment, where I think President Ramaphosa is one of the very few world leaders in the world who is able to speak on a regular basis to both President Putin and President Zelensky. And so, and that's as a result partly of that African initiative. And we'll continue to pursue it. And where there are updates that we can provide to the media, we'll certainly do so. They have not mentioned who he'll be engaging, but it is anticipated that we will have an engagement with the Secretary of State during a bilateral meeting and other high-level officials as well in the United States. As you know, on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly, generally you get to engage with a number of one's counterparts, and we anticipate that Secretary Blinken will be one of those. And this will be based on our mutual interests as countries, but also exchanging views on the current dynamics in the world as well. Kaya. I'd forgotten about you, honestly.
Once again, it's Kaya here from SABC. So, Mr. Phiri, I mean, recently we saw the Indian Prime Minister Modi going to Ukraine, and he said something to the effect that it's quite important for the global South to play a very pivotal role in finding a long-lasting solution. I would imagine that in South Africa, since this is your Brics partner, but also a country also that is able to go to Moscow, go to Kiev as well, and be able to engage. Are you supporting such move where India, for example, is proposing a peace summit? But also maybe just another question with regards to the minister's working visit to the US. Obviously, US is still a very important partner of South Africa in the context of AGOA and many other instruments. What are some of the key issues that are likely to feature, especially over the past couple of months where we saw a bit of issues between Washington and Pretoria?
Let me start there, Kaya. I think our relations with the US remain very strong, open and candid. Where we disagree on issues, we are able to say so unequivocally, and we find ways to address those disagreements. Of course, respecting our own sovereignty, we have an obligation to stand up for the positions that we believe are important to us and stand up for what we believe is consistent with our values. So that will be the ongoing nature of our relationship with the US. On the Peace Summit, you would know, Mrs. Tole, that South Africa, through the National Security Advisor and our Director General, St. Dango, have been participating in a number of initiatives which have been calling for both parties to be at the table. And if that materializes itself in the form of a peace summit, I think that would be consistent with what we aspire for that region. And ultimately, it will be consistent with what we desire, which is ultimately a long-lasting solution, but a long-lasting solution that is brought to and agreed to by both President Zelensky and both President Putin at the table. Nelson, any other questions?
Yes, we have one from Claire, who is from RFI. RFI is Radio France International. She says, according to media from Poland, an export of artillery ammunition has been put indefinitely on hold by South Africa because of the concern it would be used to help Ukraine. Is DIRCO aware of it? And if it is this a concern? Is there a concern from South Africa that weapons exported from South Africa are being used against Moscow in the war in Ukraine?
Okay, in terms of the Foreign Military Assistance Act in South Africa, we are required by law not to distribute any weaponry or sell weaponry to any state which may be engaged in a conflict, either in a primary form or a secondary form. So I think what Claire is referring to is actually a decision that would be taken by the South African government not to sell any arms to any country which may be engaged in such a type of conflict. So we'd have to look at it from that lens, but I do understand that that is something that would go through a committee called the National Arms Convention Committee, and they would ensure that they apply the Foreign Military Assistance Act. And one of the people who would sit in such a committee is the Foreign Affairs Minister or our DIRCO Minister. So it would be something, if there is weaponry in Poland that is South African and is going to be used in Poland, that would be inconsistent with that law, and also would be something that would be flagged by such a committee. All right, thanks. I think that then concludes our presser. We look forward to seeing you again soon.